And feel free to ask questions throughout. I don't think it's going to take a long time to go through the slides, but Anna and I are both available to you to answer the questions, and I will just go right into it. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Sarah. Now, the whole purpose of setting up a foundation for IWF has been something on the books for quite a long time as an organization. And what I want to talk about today is the why of it. A key theme is that this is part of our strategy. I want to talk a bit about the benefit to members that we see with the foundation, which is really amazing. And I want to explain that this opportunity that sometimes the universe serves, the opportunity emerged, and it emerged not very many months ago. So we're very, very fortunate to be in this position. Hey, Mary, thanks for joining. So those are my themes. This is part of our strategy. There is member benefit, and we are really taking advantage of a great opportunity. And the whole point of what we want to do is advance women's education. And we believe strongly that a foundation will allow us to do that because under CRA rules, foundations can only be used for very limited purposes. And one of those purposes is education. In order for us to set up a charitable foundation that can issue tax receipts to people who contribute to it, we have to follow a very strict requirement under CSA's charter. Okay, I'm getting a message from Catherine Holt, so apologies. Leah, could you send Catherine Holt the link for the...
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, please. A couple of years ago, under Patra's leadership, we did a strategic planning session with our board, and because we're starting to talk about the Fellows program at the time, which was something that Global was really promoting to all the different forums around the world that hadn't yet promoted Fellows. We also considered jointly at the same time a way to issue tax receipts. We did a little bit of legal research. We discovered it was quite expensive to set up a foundation. And so then we thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity to do some cost sharing. And we've continued that conversation with IWF Canada. But really, what happened was in this summer, we had an opportunity to take over an existing charitable foundation, meaning that we did not have to start it ourselves from scratch. And so we're going to go to the next slide. This idea of a foundation is a typical corporate entity set up under the BC Registry with a board of directors, independent accounting, and a responsibility because it's under the CRA rules for a charitable organization to publicly disclose your financial statements and also disclose who your board is. And what we've determined is we will have 6 directors for our foundation. We can have up to 14 under IWFBC, but for the foundation board, we're going to treat it, if it's approved by our members, as almost like an adjacent committee. And we are going to have a 6th director be part of the continuity from the entity that we are taking over. And so I'm going to flip to the next slide and describe how this came. Okay, I think we have lost the slide. So Sarah, did we go through Act West already? I wonder if I just haven't got to it. Okay, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I will describe where we are. Okay, so let's go to the board and just flip forward a couple. Oh, okay, this comes after. Okay. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just pause here and say the opportunity that existed was to take over what is an existing charitable foundation that does education called Act West. And we will get to who Act West is and the generosity of their founder in allowing us to take over their corporate entity. But for IWF's foundation, what we want to illustrate here is some work that our treasurer, our vice treasurer, and our bookkeeper did, was to estimate what it would take to actually run the charitable organization. So we do not have to spend the $20,000 to set it up, but we will have to operate it and take the operating expenses out of the direct revenue that we receive annually. And typically a foundation has between 5 to 25% of its operating revenue then as part of its expenses, and that should decline over time. What we are looking at from a pro forma basis is kind of a run rate of around $12,000, all things being equal. This part of the reason why this is illustrative is we're not entirely clear whether we need to extend D&O insurance to this board that is in addition, as an example, to the D&O that we already have with IWFBC. From an accounting perspective, we have to file CRA statements every year. We estimate that that requires an external bookkeeper, but that's something that we actually have to go through and determine ourselves because it will actually be quite straightforward from an accounting. So there are some costs associated with running this. What we have confirmed is there are at least 4 IWF members, current members, who are prepared to do the seed funding for IWFBC Foundation, meaning that there is no financial exposure to IWFBC in setting this up. And then from a revenue perspective, we just laid out what we believe are certain revenue streams that we will go after over every annual period. And those do include one line item specifically related to sponsoring a fellow, which we have agreed to do every 2 years. So this will be a way for us to have tax receipts to a corporate sponsor or to our members for some of the very important educational activities that we're doing. So I'm just going to pause there and see if there's any questions on the financial background that we are estimating for this entity. And you can ask questions at the end as well, of course. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, what we see as an outcome, so these 6 members of the board who would report to our current board every quarter, we would want to be able to sponsor, from an IWFBC's perspective, 4 major events every year where the foundation would be able to pay for a globally important speaker. And at the same time, we would be able to subsidize IWFBC's costs to attend. And that has been a consistent theme from our members. You pay, obviously, your membership fee for the year, but we have to do cost recovery for all of our events. And that's something that people are beginning to say it's becoming cost prohibitive, and we would like us to find an avenue for some subsidization. This is the way that we're going to do that. The other thing that's important is IWF in Europe and in the United States has an extremely high profile. It does not have the same profile in Canada, but if we are able to hold events that could also be extended to the public at large, so IWF members would be subsidized, we bring in a marquee speaker, but we could expand whoever wanted to attend to a wider audience of leaders, we would set apart IWF as a connection to global leaders. And that's something that we think is important to do as well from a profile perspective. And of course, we want to continue to have a fellow go through IWF Global's marquee program. And given that we did our own fundraising for our very first fellow, Friba Reze, last year, and the next fellow will likely be funded through their own corporation, this is something that takes the pressure off IWFBC in being able to set aside a fund for the fellows on a continual basis. And let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here we get to, well, what is the process? And the process is Act West is an existing charitable organization. It was set up by Dupuy Langan, and it had a very specific purpose, also under the Education Charter through CRA rules, to support single mothers to receive a university education. It's been extremely successful, and when it winds up, 10 women will have had life-changing support by Act West to receive a degree. And Anna's confirmed that many of these women have gone on to be on the Dean's List, have achieved, despite the fact they're raising their families at the same time, and have been extremely well supported by Act West. This charitable organization is winding up because Dupuy Langan was sold, and it's being wound up as a corporation. And so the holding vehicle for its charitable foundation is going away. And the foundation did look at a number of other entities to continue its purpose and was in active discussions with them when this came to a discussion of IWF board members. And there was a conversation about, could this actually be very straightforward? And the legal advice that Act West received was, all we need to do is have the board of Act West have its directors, save one, resign, and then appoint 5 new board directors from IWFBC. So the charter would continue, and the name change and any charter change would occur under a new board in the new fiscal year. And so that's our proposition, is to actually take an existing foundation, change its board, which then enables you from a governance perspective in 2025, Jan 1 beginning, the board will legally change the name of the foundation and change its purpose. And by change its purpose, we mean widen its purpose to deliver IWFBC's purpose of education, and enable the Act West remaining 3 participants to continue to have the funding that exists for them today, which will be separately accounted, run its course until they finish. So we're really allowing Act West to dissolve as a corporate entity, but to continue to finish with its 3 active participants today, and IWFBC to then begin in its own accounting to become its own charitable organization. And the reason we would have 1 remaining board member from Act West, which is Anna Narati, who's on the call today, is so that from an operational, i.e. direct communication with these 3 last participants, she would hold the balance of support for them. And that would be ring-fenced to that mandate, as would the existing monies, which we have confirmed are sufficient. So we're very fortunate, because this is not something that was available to us before. We would have had to have the legal startup of the foundation ourselves and pay for the accounting startup and all of those other corporate pieces. And here we are able to then simply transition across. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So here's a little bit of the way in which this is going to move forward, and bearing in mind that this opportunity arrived on IWFBC board's doorstep in the summer. It's quite remarkable that we're going to be able to move this through so that in the new calendar year, that will become a new fiscal year for the foundation. In the beginning of September, we got serious about, well, what does this mean, and how would Act West board prepare to dissolve itself and then appoint IWFBC board members? And what that board asked, because they were very open to doing this, is that IWFBC confirm through a memorandum of understanding that it would continue to allow those 3 program participants to receive their existing funding through the board. So an MOU has been signed. It was ratified by both boards. And that enables us then to give their board the governance satisfaction that, in fact, we will support those education aims going forward. What the support looks like is simply governance support. The funding is existing, and so is the operational support. What we will do with our members is at our annual general meeting, we'll have a special resolution which we will present to our members, and we will ask for their permission to set up the IWFBC Foundation and to appoint 5 directors. So that will be a double motion that will come before our members in the AGM. And on that basis, if it's approved, then we will communicate with Act West that went through our membership. Their board directors would then formally resign, and their board would appoint the new foundation directors, and we then have governance control. So that switchover would happen as of January 1st, which allows Act West to conclude their calendar fiscal, and we would begin ours. And we will then apply for a formal corporate name change, and we will amend the charter as a board so that the particulars of IWFBC's members' needs will be taken into account. And the next slide. So this is essentially what IWFBC will be, is a broader reporting alignment to the board with a subsidiary board, in effect, of a charitable foundation. And immediately that foundation board will begin to do its own development of revenue and seek out sponsors. There's a corporate sponsor, one of the big accounting firms has already expressed interest. So I think this is actually going to be quite, there's going to be quite a bit of momentum in the new year for the way in which we will seek out sponsorship. So quite excited by that. In terms of what are risks for IWFBC, this is another corporate entity. We will have to look at the D&O insurance requirements, which is why it was costed in the pro forma. And it's a time risk because you ask the same busy people to be busy. And so likely the president and or the past president of IWFBC will be 2 of those recommended board directors on the foundation board. From a financial risk perspective, as I mentioned before, there are already 4 IWFBC members who are prepared to support the seed funding for the foundation in order for it to get going. So that is not a risk to our membership. And I think, maybe what we need to look at this as is the upside opportunity for us to have a taxable, tax receivable benefit for fundraising is enormous. And as you all know, what we have been doing for fundraising is essentially fairly low key, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. It's game changing to be able to have large corporate sponsors. The other thing that we would like to do, we have already let the president of IWF Canada know and their treasurer that this is in development. And I think they're watching quite carefully. We have offered that this is a way for the 2 entities to jointly coordinate our governance through a foundation board. And if that is something that is of interest to them in the new year, then that would be a really wonderful opportunity to combine our efforts around women's leadership and women's education. So we'll see in the new year, once we've established the board, whether that's something they want to do and whether we want to then move forward on an amendment of the charter to be an Ontario and BC charitable organization. But as it stands right now, it will remain a corporate entity in BC. So it's been an interesting journey since end of June, early July. Anna has been amazing to work with. IWFBC's board has been incredibly supportive, and the momentum continues. So I'm excited exemplify what this can be. And I think it's game changing for IWF. So with that, maybe we'll drop the slides and we can pull up individual slides if people want to go back to them and